It really depends on your background, your goals,
Sure.
how much muscle mass you currently have, whether you're male or female, um, your glycogen stores. So that's why I have the two different protocols. Carbonite really is all about just shredding all the body fat off of you. You only eat carbs one night a week, and it works amazingly well. The only people it doesn't work for right out of the box are those who are metabolically deranged in some way.
Sure.
I've been working with Dr. Rocky Patel, and we've been looking at all kinds of blood markers for glucose, triglyceride levels, and everything. And you have to see some pretty serious derangement to where the diet just doesn't work and requires some modifications.
Sure.
So that one's just almost rock solid. And then carb backloading was specifically designed for people who weight lift. So if you weight lift in a state of not having eaten carbs in the first half of the day or before you train, you actually utilize a lot more glycogen during your exercise, your intramuscular glycogen. And by wiping that out, then you can refill that later in the evening. You've got more storage capacity for the glycogen in your muscles instead of your fat cells. And what I'm exploring right now are there are some very wasteful processes that happen when you don't eat carbohydrates all day. I call it the spillover effect, and I'm still exploring those mechanisms of why that works.
Okay.
Because some people are eating carbohydrate loads that don't make sense, and they'll still lose body fat.
Yeah.
From a just a sheer volume point of view, don't even talk about calories. Just a sheer volume point of view, it shouldn't work. That means there's other mechanisms at play there where your body doesn't have a capacity to process those carbohydrates efficiently enough, and they're either wasted away as body heat, which we
Right.
see a lot, or there's massive excretion through your kidneys or even possibly through your intestinal tract. I
Yeah.
can't say for sure.
Yeah, that's really interesting. How much do you think of that has to do with just like your genetic heritage? Because I myself am more of like an endomorphic structure, and
Mm.
so like I'm kind of have to keep my carbs on watch. You know what I mean? But I have friends who can eat that 400 grams a day and they stay extremely lean. So what do you think about that?
I think there's an interplay there, not only between your genetic heritage, but your food history.
Sure.
And I'm talking about all the way back to when you were 1 or 2 years old.
Right.
We're seeing a lot of stuff that's like depending on what you ate, how much you ate of it, how young you were, it can literally change your DNA sequencing to make you more predisposed to storing fat. So there's a lot of factors there. That's why I always talk about you just kind of have to figure it out for yourself because there's obviously a genetic component.
Right.
Historically, if you were fat, like I was a really fat kid, so if I overdo it too many days in a row, I instantly see it like right on my stomach where I used to have a huge amount of girth.
Right.
That smooths out really fast. So you've got to look at a lot of factors to say how often you compound how many carbs at night.
Right. And so is the factory that you play around with your clients the most? Is it the carbohydrates and the carbohydrate timing in terms of body fat loss?
There's a couple things. So that's the first thing I usually start to tweak for them. Maybe cutting down the number of meals, the number of carbs, whatever they're more comfortable with. And then I've actually started playing around with backloading the protein as well.
Hmm.
So pushing more of their protein to the evening because if you are if you're over a certain percentage of protein with the fat that you're consuming, then your body gets kicked out of ketosis.
Yeah, gluconeogenesis converts into sugar.
Yeah,
Yeah.
starts.
Okay.
Yeah, so I've been playing with that, and the protein back for people who are having a really difficult time shifting more of their protein load to the evening starts to make a really big difference too.
Interesting. So
So
would you
it's a combination of factors.
sure. So would you basically have somebody do like mostly like a high fat for the beginning of the day or a fasting to a high fat and then a training session and then mostly higher carb and higher protein towards the end of the day? Is that kind of what you're sort of tinkering with right now?
Pretty much, yeah. So I try to keep them as fatty as they're willing to go in the first half of the day. I don't like fasting, having people fast for too long.
Sure.
Just there's no real benefit and there can be some consequences. So I always try to get them to break it with something like coffee and whipping cream, or bacon, really fatty bacon. Middle of the day is like a high fat meat, maybe with some vegetables. Just really the only time I ever suggest eating vegetables is if you need them as a vessel for butter. So yeah, so they're having like hamburger with broccoli just soaked in butter. And then in the evening after they train, I really don't put any constraints on them at all. At that point, if you load up on the protein, people usually take their protein shakes, things like that. You load up with those things, your fat content doesn't really seem to play as big of a role in the evening.
Sure.
Now, I'm sure somebody could push the fold on that and eat nothing but 2 or 3 cheesecakes every night, and we would see a problem with fat content, but nobody has been willing to do that yet, luckily.
Yeah. So what negative side effects do you see of fasting? So I'm just interested in that.
It depends on your goals. So if your main focus is body weight or muscle mass maintenance or muscle mass growth, you're essentially cutting that off and going backwards the first half of the day. If your goal is just health and getting rid of body fat, it's not necessarily so bad because you are creating a very good environment for fat mobilization.
Sure.
Um, so really, that's why most of my clients work out. And I would prefer them to have calories for too long, affect hormone levels. You can affect intracellular processes that shut down anabolic processes. And really, all you need to do to get the benefit of fasting is spark ketosis. So, and you can do that in a number of ways. I had somebody the other day literally down 3 tablespoons of MCT oil and chase it with a shot of vinegar. And it was the first time they've been having a lot of trouble. It's the first time we've gotten their ketone levels from zero point 0.3 up to over 1 finally. Um, so there's little tricks you can do like that to basically break that fast in the morning and not suffer negative consequences.
What's your take on the butter coffee MCT oil that everybody's doing these days? The Dave Asprey approach.
Yeah. Well, you know what's funny is MCT wasn't on his radar until he did an interview with me about a year and a half ago, and then all of a sudden he was all about MCT oil. I might be a little bitter about that, but because he was just the butter and coffee guy,
Right.
and now MCT is all the rage. And the MCT is great. And, I think it's a great addition. The butter, if you like the taste, fine. If not, there's no real benefit that I know of to eat butter with your coffee in the morning,
It's
other than
just fat.
yeah, it's just a fat load.
Gotcha. Gotcha. That's really interesting. So, what was I going to ask? I had a good question there, and I just blanked on it for a second. So, ketosis. That's what we were talking about. So, ketosis. Do you do blood measurements of people's ketosis when you're trying to get them in that ketogenic state?
Yeah, I have been over the last 6 months. I've been trying to get that data, and that's one reason I'm moving here soon to go work with a medical group closely, so I can actually send people in and get them the equipment to start recording that data on a consistent basis, so I can see what's going on with these cyclic ketogenic diets. The
Right.
problem is we've got great data, great scientific data on hardcore ketogenic diets,
Right.
hardcore low carb diets that might not necessarily be ketogenic, and then high carb diets. What we don't have is any good data on the cycling back and forth on a daily or weekly basis, and are actually seeing some very interesting things with diabetic patients from that point of view. But I don't have any real good data on athletes, so I'm going to start trying to collect that so I can refine these processes.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. It never made a lot of sense to me to go like low carb forever. I mean,
Yeah,
it's great if somebody's obese. It's a great way to kickstart them. But
right.
it never made sense to me, especially like if you look, just if I'm thinking anecdotally here, of course, but like if we look into the past and we just think about, when were carbohydrates available in the summer and when were they not available in the winter? Like everybody's going to eat carbohydrates at some point,
Right.
and it's got to happen. So I think that's really great that you're looking for the data on that. How quickly do you see people dump from a non-ketogenic state to a ketogenic state after like a carb night?